Somewhere in the future, a child may open her eyes inside a starship and learn the most terrifying truth a human being can inherit. Earth is not home anymore. Not because Earth has vanished, not because the old blue world has been forgotten, but because she was born too far away to ever stand beneath its sky. Her grandparents may have remembered oceans. Her parents may have heard stories of rain. But for her, the universe is a corridor of metal, glass, soil, recycled water, artificial daylight, sleeping forests, humming engines, and stars that never grow closer fast enough. This is the idea at the heart of our journey tonight. A generation ship, not a rocket, not a space shuttle, not a heroic capsule with a small crew and a short mission. A generation ship is something much stranger, much larger, and much more haunting. It is a moving world, a sealed civilization, a human-made island crossing the black ocean between the stars, carrying people who may never see the destination, and children who never agreed to leave. We will call this imagined book and this documentary The Long Arc Between the Stars. It begins with a simple problem. The stars are too far away. Even the nearest star system beyond the sun lies across a distance so enormous that human language almost fails. Light itself, the fastest thing in the universe, needs more than 4 years to reach it. Our fastest spacecraft would take tens of thousands of years to cross that same gulf. Science fiction often gives us shortcuts. Warp drives, wormholes, hyperspace lanes, suspended animation. But in the known universe, those doors remain locked. They are beautiful ideas, but not reliable foundations for a real human migration. So if we cannot bend space, and if we cannot sleep safely for centuries, then perhaps we must do something far more difficult. We must build a ship that does not merely transport life. It must become life. Tonight, we will travel through 8 chapters. We will begin with distance, the silent wall that makes interstellar travel so difficult. Then we will enter the design of the ship itself, a world built inside steel and shadow. We will follow air, water, food, energy, soil, bacteria, and the fragile chemistry that keeps breath moving from one generation to the next. We will descend into the social heart of the vessel, where law, memory, education, family, conflict, love, grief, and power must survive without escape. We will examine the biology of a closed population, the risks of disease, mutation, inbreeding, and medical collapse. We will look at psychology in deep space, where the sky never changes and the mission may feel more like a myth than a plan. We will ask who has the right to send unborn generations on a journey they did not choose. And finally, we will imagine the arrival, the moment when the descendants of Earth approach another sun and must decide whether they are still human, still explorers, or something new. This is not only a story about engines. It is a story about patience. It is about whether civilization can fit inside a ship, whether culture can survive without a planet, whether hope can be inherited like a language, and whether a destination can remain meaningful after the people who chose it have turned to dust. So settle in. Let the darkness outside your window become the darkness between the stars. Imagine the quiet pulse of a vessel larger than a city, drifting through the deep night, and listen closely, because the first sound of interstellar travel may not be the roar of an engine. It may be the breathing of children who were born on the way. Chapter 1: The Wall of Distance. Before we can imagine a generation ship, we must first understand the wall it is built to cross. The universe is not empty in the way a room is empty. A room may be crossed in a few steps. A desert may be crossed in days. An ocean may be crossed in weeks. But interstellar space is emptiness on a scale so vast that the mind has no natural shape for it. We evolved under one sky, on one planet, with distances measured by feet, miles, rivers, mountains, and horizons. The stars were lights above us, not places we could reach, and yet they are places. Every star is a sun. Many of those suns may have planets. Some of those planets may have atmospheres, oceans, frozen plains, methane skies, iron mountains, or underground seas. Somewhere out there, perhaps, are worlds where human beings could build again. But between here and there lies the oldest and most patient barrier in exploration: distance. The nearest star system to our sun is Alpha Centauri, a triple star system more than 4 light-years away. A light-year is not a measure of time, but of distance. It is the distance light travels in 1 year, moving at almost 300,000 kilometers every second. Light can circle Earth more than 7 times in a single second. It can travel from the moon to Earth in a little more than 1 second. Sunlight reaches Earth in about 8 minutes. But to reach Alpha Centauri, light needs more than 4 years. That means when we look at Alpha Centauri tonight, we do not see it as it is now. We see it as it was years ago. The universe is not only wide, it is delayed. Every star is a message from the past. For a human spacecraft, the challenge is even more severe. The fastest machines we have ever built are astonishing by ordinary standards, yet painfully slow by cosmic ones. They can escape Earth. They can cross the orbit of Mars. They can fly past Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and out toward the dark edge of the solar system. But compared with the distance between stars, they are like dust drifting across a cathedral. A spacecraft traveling at the speeds of our current deep space probes would need tens of thousands of years to reach even the nearest neighboring star. Tens of thousands of years. Longer than all recorded human civilization. Longer than the rise and fall of empires, languages, religions, cities, and entire ways of life. This is why science fiction reaches for miracles. Warp drive imagines bending the space around a ship so that the vessel does not move faster than light through space, but rides inside a bubble where space itself is distorted. Wormholes imagine tunnels through space-time, shortcuts connecting distant regions of the universe. Suspended animation imagines the body slowed almost to stillness, so a person can sleep through centuries and wake as if from a long winter night. These ideas are powerful. They are not foolish. They arise from real questions in physics and biology. But they are not technologies we can depend on. A warp drive may require forms of energy or exotic matter that we do not know how to create or control. Wormholes, if they exist, may be microscopic, unstable, unreachable, or impossible to hold open. Deep hibernation for humans remains far beyond anything medicine can promise for journeys lasting centuries. So the generation ship begins where the shortcuts end. It accepts the cruelty of distance. It does not pretend the stars are close. It does not ask one crew to survive the entire voyage. Instead, it changes the definition of the traveler. The traveler is no longer a single person. The traveler is a lineage. A generation ship would carry a population large enough to live, reproduce, educate children, care for the sick, repair the vessel, govern itself, and preserve the purpose of the mission across many human lifetimes. The first passengers would launch knowing they might never arrive. Their children might not arrive. Their grandchildren might not arrive. The destination would be a promise moving forward through blood, memory, and ritual. In this sense, A generation ship is less like an airplane and more like a country. It must have farms, hospitals, workshops, schools, courts, libraries, nurseries, cemeteries, and places of silence. It must have engineers who understand systems built before they were born. It must have teachers who can explain Earth to students who have never seen a real ocean. It must have artists who can make meaning inside a metal horizon. It must have doctors, farmers, biologists, mechanics, counselors, historians, and leaders. It must have people who know how to repair a pump, settle a dispute, deliver a child, recycle waste, maintain a reactor, grow wheat, preserve genetic diversity, and remember why the ship is moving at all. And all of this must happen inside a closed environment. On Earth, mistakes are softened by the planet. If a field fails, food can be brought from elsewhere. If a machine breaks, parts can be shipped. If air is polluted, winds can move it. If water is contaminated, rivers, rain, aquifers, and oceans form part of a vast natural cycle. Earth is not easy, but it is generous beyond measure. It gives us gravity, magnetism, weather, sunlight, microbial life, and a biosphere so complex that no human system has ever truly replaced it. A generation ship has no such forgiveness. Every breath must be made possible by machinery and biology working together. Every drop of water must be cleaned and used again. Every nutrient must cycle through bodies, soil, plants, waste, microbes, and back into food. Every gram of metal matters. Every tool matters. Every spare part matters. A broken valve can become a political crisis. A failed crop can become a moral emergency. A fire can become an extinction event. The ship must be stable, but not frozen. It must change enough to adapt, yet not so much that it forgets itself. It must protect freedom, but not allow freedom to destroy the systems, keeping everyone alive. It must allow children to become themselves, while also training them to maintain a mission chosen before their birth. That is the first great tension of the generation ship. It is built for survival, but filled with human beings. And human beings are not simple passengers. We dream, we argue, we fall in love with the wrong people, we form factions, we tell stories, we become bored, we rebel against inherited duties, we worship, we doubt, we make art, we break rules, we ask why, we ask who benefits, we ask what gives the dead the right to command the living. Imagine the first century of flight. At the beginning, the ship is still close enough to Earth for memory to feel real. The first generation remembers launch day. They remember gravity under an open sky. They remember the smell of rain on concrete, the sound of wind in leaves, the chaotic beauty of cities. They carry photographs, recordings, seeds, embryos, books, maps, songs, and languages. They speak of Earth not as legend, but as home. Their children grow up differently. They know Earth through screens, stories, and lessons. They may love it, but their love is secondhand. To them, Earth is not a place where they scraped their knees or watched clouds move. It is a sacred origin, a blue ancestor. By the third or fourth generation, Earth may become almost mythic, a world too large to understand, a paradise, a prison, a mistake, a dream, depending on who tells the story. The mission itself may begin to change shape. Why continue? Who decided? What if the destination is dead? What if the ship is home now? What if arrival is more dangerous than drifting forever? These questions are not technical failures. They are inevitable. A generation ship is a machine designed to cross distance, but it must cross time as well. And time may be the harder ocean. Because metal can be shielded, Engines can be repaired. Orbits can be calculated. But meaning is fragile. Purpose decays when it is not renewed. A mission lasting centuries cannot survive only as an instruction manual. It must become culture. It must become education, ceremony, law, identity, and perhaps even faith. The people aboard must believe, in some form, that their lives are not merely maintenance. They must feel that they are part of a story large enough to hold sacrifice. This is why the generation ship is one of the most haunting ideas in all of space exploration. It forces us to admit that reaching the stars may not look like a triumphant leap. It may look like a long surrender to patience. Not a single heroic moment, but a chain of ordinary days repeated across centuries. Meals cooked under artificial light. Children learning mathematics beside hydroponic gardens. Old people closing their eyes to the soft vibration of engines, knowing they have moved humanity forward by only a fraction of the journey. And still, the ship continues. Outside, there is almost nothing. No birds, no weather, no dawn in the natural sense. Only cosmic rays, distant suns, the cold background glow of the universe, and the thin bright line of the destination, perhaps invisible for most of the voyage. Inside, there is everything. A baby crying in a nursery, a technician listening to the rhythm of pumps, a teacher describing oceans, a gardener touching leaves that grow from recycled breath, a council debating a law that may affect children not yet born, a young person standing near an observation window, staring into the star field, wondering whether the ship is a bridge, a cage, or the only world that ever truly loved them. The wall of distance does not only challenge our engines, it challenges our idea of what a journey is. And if humanity ever builds a generation ship, the first great discovery may come long before arrival. It may be the discovery that the distance between stars is not just measured in light years. It is measured in memory, in duty, in loneliness, in the courage to plant a tree whose shade will be felt by someone born beneath another sun. Chapter 2. A world built inside a ship. To build a generation ship, humanity would first have to abandon one of its oldest habits, the belief that a ship is something separate from the world. A boat crosses an ocean, but the ocean remains outside it. An airplane crosses the sky, but the atmosphere carries it. A spacecraft leaves Earth, but for most missions, Earth is still nearby in every meaningful way. It remains the source of supplies, instructions, rescue plans, replacement parts, and emotional certainty. Even astronauts in orbit, floating above the planet, can look down and see the blue curve of home passing beneath them every 90 minutes. A generation ship would have no such comfort. Once it leaves the solar system, Earth becomes a point of light, then a memory, then a direction in old navigation records. No emergency launch can reach it. No cargo vessel can arrive with medicine. No government agency can send technicians to repair a cracked pressure wall. The ship must contain not only people, but the conditions that make people possible. It must become a world. The first question is size. How large must such a vessel be? Large enough to carry people, yes, but also large enough to carry air, water, soil, food systems, waste processing, machines, manufacturing tools, spare materials, medical facilities, schools, archives, and the countless small redundancies that separate inconvenience from death. On Earth, life depends on layers of backup so vast we rarely notice them. If one forest burns, another still breathes. If one river dries, clouds still gather elsewhere. If one harvest fails, trade routes may bring grain from another region. A generation ship must imitate that resilience inside a finite shell. This is why the image of a sleek silver rocket is misleading. A real generation ship might not look fast. It might not look elegant. It might look like a moving asteroid, a rotating city, a cluster of cylinders, rings, tanks, gardens, factories, and shielded habitats wrapped around an engine system. It might be ugly in the way survival is ugly, layered, reinforced, patched, practical, and immense. One of the most difficult problems would be gravity. Human bodies were shaped by Earth. Bones, muscles, blood flow, balance, pregnancy, development, and even the way cells respond to stress are all influenced by gravity. In weightlessness, astronauts lose bone density and muscle mass. Fluids shift. Balance systems become confused. The heart adapts to a new workload. For a short mission, these changes can be managed. For a lifetime, and especially for children born and raised in space, the risks become much deeper. A generation ship might need artificial gravity, not through magic, but through rotation. If a habitat spins, the people inside feel a steady outward push against the floor. This is not gravity in the true planetary sense, but it can imitate many of gravity's effects. Imagine a vast wheel turning slowly in the dark, its inner surface lined with homes, gardens, laboratories, and walking paths. To the people living there, the floor curves upward in the distance. The sky is not open air, but the opposite side of the ring, softened by lighting, mist, and architecture, designed to help the mind forget the impossible shape of its home. The rotation must be carefully chosen. Spin too slowly, and the ring must be enormous to create Earth-like gravity. Spin too quickly, and the motion may cause dizziness, disorientation, and strange effects when people move their heads or throw objects. The ship must balance physics with biology, engineering with comfort. It must not merely keep people alive. It must allow them to grow up without feeling that their own world is constantly making them ill. Then comes radiation. On Earth, we live beneath invisible shields. The atmosphere absorbs dangerous particles. The planet's magnetic field deflects much of the charged radiation from the sun and from deep space. We do not feel these protections, so we forget they exist. But between the stars, the ship would be exposed to cosmic rays, high-energy particles that can pass through matter, damage DNA, increase cancer risk, harm electronics, and threaten future generations. A generation ship would need armor, not armor against enemies, but against the universe itself. Water can help absorb radiation. So can certain plastics, hydrogen-rich materials, regolith, ice, and thick layers of mass. One practical design might place water tanks, fuel reserves, waste stores, and agricultural zones around the most sensitive human habitats, turning necessities into shielding. The safest rooms might be deep inside the vessel, surrounded by layers of life support and stored material. During bursts of solar activity, if the ship is still near a star, people might gather in storm shelters, waiting quietly while invisible particles strike the outer hull like silent rain. But mass is expensive. Every kilogram must be accelerated. Every shield, every tank, every beam, every library, every seed bank, every medical scanner, every child's bed must be pushed across interstellar space. The larger and safer the ship becomes, the harder it is to move. The harder it is to move, the more energy it requires. The more energy it requires, the more fuel, reactors, collectors, or propulsion systems it must carry. There is no free road between the stars. Propulsion may be the single greatest engineering challenge. Chemical rockets, the kind that lifted humanity from Earth, are far too limited for fast interstellar travel. Nuclear propulsion might offer far better performance. Fusion engines, if mastered, could release energy by fusing light atoms, similar to the reactions that power stars. Antimatter, in theory, could provide extraordinary energy, but producing and storing it safely at the required scale remains far beyond present capability. Beamed sails offer another vision. A huge, lightweight sail pushed by lasers or particle beams from the solar system, accelerating without carrying all its fuel. But a generation ship would be massive, and slowing down at the destination would be just as important as speeding up at the start. A ship that cannot break is not an arc, it is a bullet. So the designers must think in centuries. Perhaps the ship accelerates slowly for years, then coasts for generations, then begins an equally careful deceleration as it approaches another star. The crew may live their entire lives during the quiet middle phase, when the engines are mostly silent and the vessel moves through darkness on momentum inherited from ancestors. Inside that drifting world, the architecture would shape civilization. A generation ship cannot be built like a submarine, with cramped corridors and metal bunks, unless we are imagining a prison rather than a society. People need space, privacy, beauty, variety, and the ability to form memories in places that feel meaningful. A child needs more than oxygen. A child needs somewhere to run, somewhere to hide, somewhere to be surprised. Adults need gathering spaces, quiet rooms, work areas, gardens, ceremonies, and places where grief can be held. Perhaps the ship has districts, agricultural cylinders glowing green and gold under artificial suns, residential terraces arranged along the curve of a rotating habitat, water reservoirs that double as parks, with carefully managed ponds reflecting false daylight, workshops where metals are printed, cut, melted, reused, and shaped into tools, medical decks kept warmer and cleaner than the rest of the vessel, archives stored in shielded cores, holding the memory of Earth in text, sound, image, genome, and seed. There may be no true sky, but there may be ceilings designed to change like weather. There may be artificial dawns, soft evenings, simulated moonlight, and long, dim hours when the ship lowers its voice. The lighting schedule would matter. Human biology follows rhythms of brightness and darkness. Sleep, mood, hormones, alertness, and memory are tied to cycles older than civilization. A generation ship must carry not only human bodies, but human time. Yet every illusion must serve a system. The artificial river is also part of water recycling. The park is also part of air renewal. The forest is also a psychological stabilizer, a carbon sink, a food source, a schoolroom, and a sacred place. Nothing aboard can be only decorative, yet a ship without beauty may become unbearable. This is one of the quiet truths of long-duration survival. Beauty is not a luxury. Beauty is a life support system for the mind. The ship must also repair itself. Over centuries, parts wear down, materials fatigue, seals crack, pumps fail, electronics degrade, software becomes obsolete or misunderstood. Micrometeoroids strike the hull, radiation damages circuits, mold appears where it should not, a bearing begins to vibrate, a sensor drifts out of calibration, a tiny leak forms behind a panel that no living engineer has opened in 80 years. To survive, the ship needs manufacturing capacity. It must mine itself carefully, recycle metals, refine materials, grow plastics or synthesize them, produce circuit components, maintain precision tools, and train each generation in skills that may not be needed often, but become vital when disaster arrives. Knowledge cannot live only in computers. It must live in hands, in apprenticeships, in repeated practice, in the muscle memory of people who know the sound a healthy pump makes in the dark. A generation ship, then, is not a single invention. It is an agreement between thousands of inventions, all depending on one another. The walls hold pressure. The pressure holds air. The air feeds lungs. The lungs feed labor. Labor maintains machines. Machines circulate water. Water grows crops. Crops feed children. Children inherit the ship. The ship carries the children. The children become the future crew. The future crew protects the walls. A circle, closed but never still. From the outside, such a vessel may look silent, a faint speck crossing the black, a human-made moon without a planet. But inside, it would be filled with small sounds, footsteps on curved floors, leaves trembling under ventilation fans, distant machinery, voices in classrooms, music in narrow apartments, tools clicking in repair bays. A newborn taking its first breath beneath a ceiling, painted the color of an earth sky. That is the true design problem. Not how to build a machine that can fly for centuries. How to build a world that can be loved for centuries. Because if the people inside come to hate the ship, the mission is already dying. And if they love it too much, they may never want to leave. The generation ship must be home, but not the final home. It must be strong enough to preserve life, gentle enough to nurture meaning, and honest enough to remind every generation that the walls around them are both shelter and boundary. A world built inside a ship is still a ship, and beyond its hull, the stars wait with a patience no human civilization has ever had to match. Chapter 3. The Closed Loop of Life. A generation ship would not travel through emptiness alone. It would carry a second universe inside it, smaller than a planet, but just as delicate in its own way. A breathing, drinking, eating, decaying, recycling universe. A place where nothing truly disappears. Where every exhale, every drop of sweat, every leaf, every crumb, every broken cell, every spoonful of waste must eventually find its way back into the circle of life. On Earth, we live inside a system so large that it feels infinite. We throw things away, though there is no away. We breathe oxygen made by plants and ancient ocean organisms. We drink water that may have passed through clouds, rivers, glaciers, dinosaurs, forests, and the bodies of countless living creatures. We eat food grown in soil, made from weathered rock, dead leaves, fungi, bacteria, worms, and time. The planet hides the complexity from us because the machinery is everywhere. A generation ship cannot hide it. Its passengers would know that their lives depend on loops, closed loops, air loops, water loops, carbon loops, nitrogen loops, mineral loops, energy loops, biological loops, mechanical loops. Every system must return what it takes, or the ship slowly dies. Air is the first miracle. A person inhales oxygen and exhales carbon dioxide. On Earth, plants, algae, and photosynthetic microbes help reverse that exchange, taking in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen through photosynthesis. On a ship, something similar must happen, but under control. The vessel may carry greenhouses, algae tanks, bioreactors, and chemical scrubbers. Plants may provide food and oxygen, while machines remove excess carbon dioxide when biology cannot keep up. No single method is safe enough by itself. Redundancy becomes a kind of prayer. Imagine a long agricultural chamber lit by artificial sunlight. Rows of wheat, potatoes, beans, tomatoes, leafy greens, fruiting vines, dwarf trees, and carefully selected crops grow in layered systems. Some are planted in soil. Others float in nutrient-rich water. Some hang in vertical racks, roots exposed to mist. Nearby, transparent tubes glow green with algae, turning light and carbon dioxide into biomass and oxygen. Fans move air through the leaves. Sensors measure humidity, gas balance, microbial activity, and trace contaminants. The garden is beautiful, but it is also a lung. If the plants fail, the people gasp. Water is the second miracle. A ship cannot carry enough fresh water for centuries unless almost all of it is reused. Drinking water, cooking water, washing water, urine, condensation from breath, moisture from plants, and wastewater from industry must be collected, filtered, purified, tested, and returned. Some methods would be mechanical, some chemical, some biological. Distillation, membranes, activated carbon, ultraviolet sterilization, microbial treatment, mineral balancing, and constant monitoring may all be part of the cycle. On Earth, water is emotionally simple. Rain falls. Rivers run. Oceans shine. On a generation ship, water would feel sacred because everyone would understand its history. A glass of water might have passed through 1,000 bodies, 1,000 roots, 1,000 filters, and 1,000 quiet machines. It would be clean, but never innocent. It would be memory made liquid. Children might learn early that wasting water is not merely rude. It is a violation of trust. Food is the third miracle, and perhaps the most psychologically powerful. A ship can store food, but storage alone cannot feed a population for centuries. It must produce food continuously. This means agriculture becomes central to the culture of the vessel. Farming is no longer something done somewhere outside the city. Farming is the heart of civilization. The distance between a failed harvest and hunger may be only a few weeks. But space agriculture is not simple. Plants need light, water, nutrients, carbon dioxide, stable temperatures, pollination, pest control, microbial balance, and protection from disease. Soil itself is not just dirt. It is a living system full of organisms that help recycle nutrients and support plant growth. Hydroponics and aeroponics can reduce mass and increase efficiency, but they require pumps, sensors, nutrient solutions, and technical precision. Soil-based systems may provide ecological stability and psychological comfort, but they are heavier and harder to manage. The ship may use both. There might be high-efficiency crop decks where calories are produced with mathematical discipline. Potatoes, grains, legumes, algae, fungi, and protein-rich plants. There might also be garden spaces meant for mental health. Herbs, flowers, fruit trees, and small patches of soil where children can touch something that feels ancient. Food is nutrition, but it is also culture. A meal is memory. A recipe is history. The smell of bread can become an archive more powerful than any data core. Yet even food must be redesigned. Meat from large animals would be expensive in space. Cattle, pigs, and sheep require huge amounts of food, water, and space compared with plants. A generation ship may rely mostly on plant-based diets, supplemented by cultured meat, insects, fish in aquaponic systems, microbial protein, yeast, fungi, and carefully managed small animals. Every calorie must justify its place. Every flavor must be balanced against mass, energy, and waste. This does not mean life aboard must be joyless. Human beings are artists of limitation. Give us wheat, yeast, oil, herbs, and heat, and we will invent a festival. Give us soy, mushrooms, peppers, and memory, and we will recreate a grandmother's kitchen in orbit around nothing. Over generations, ship cuisine would become its own civilization. Earth recipes would adapt. New dishes would emerge from closed-loop ingredients. Holidays might be marked by rare fruit, preserved spices, or the first harvest of a crop grown from seeds carried across the void. Waste is the fourth miracle, though we rarely call it that. On a generation ship, waste is not shameful. It is unfinished material. Human waste contains water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and other nutrients needed by plants. Food scraps, dead leaves, microbial sludge, worn fabrics, and biological remains must be processed safely. Composting, anaerobic digestion, chemical treatment, sterilization, and nutrient recovery could turn waste back into fertilizer, fuel, or raw materials. But the system must be careful. Pathogens can spread. Toxins can accumulate. Heavy metals can enter the food chain. A closed environment magnifies mistakes. On Earth, pollution disperses, though not without harm. On a ship, pollution returns. If a harmful compound enters the water or soil cycle and is not removed, it may come back in the bread, the soup, the blood, and the bones of children. This creates a new kind of ethics. Environmental responsibility is no longer abstract. It is immediate. The people aboard cannot pretend that nature is elsewhere. They are inside nature, and nature is inside machinery. A careless act does not vanish into a landfill beyond the horizon. It enters the shared body of the ship. The smallest organisms may become the most important citizens. Bacteria, fungi, algae, and other microbes would help digest waste, fix nutrients, support plant roots, ferment food, protect human health, and maintain ecological stability. But microbes can also mutate, bloom, invade, infect, corrode, and destroy. The ship's microbiome would be as important as its engine. It would need monitoring not only in hospitals, but in walls, filters, farms, kitchens, nurseries, and lungs. There is something humbling in this. Humanity may cross the stars not as lone masters of technology, but as a traveling ecosystem. We would bring wheat, algae, yeast, gut bacteria, pollinators, seed banks, embryos, fungi, worms, and invisible life clinging to skin. The Ark would not carry humans alone. It would carry the old partnerships that made humans possible. Energy would govern all of it. Plants need light. Pumps need electricity. Air systems need circulation. Water systems need purification. Computers need power. Medical devices, manufacturing tools, temperature control, communications, sensors, doors, elevators, and emergency systems all require energy. In deep space, sunlight becomes weak as the ship moves far from the sun, unless the vessel carries large collectors or travels near other stars. A generation ship would likely require long-lasting power sources, perhaps nuclear fission, fusion if available, or other advanced systems designed for reliability across centuries. Energy is not only engineering, it is politics. Who decides how much power goes to farms, industry, housing, research, art, recreation, or luxury? During a crisis, who loses light first? Whose district grows colder? Which crops are saved? Which machines are shut down? Every closed loop has a moral shadow. A generation ship must ration without becoming cruel. It must conserve without crushing the human spirit. It must teach that resources are limited, but also that life is more than efficiency. A perfectly optimized ship with no music, no privacy, no celebration, and no room for tenderness may preserve bodies while starving souls. Perhaps this is why the agricultural decks would become sacred places. Imagine walking there during the ship's quiet hours. The artificial sun has dimmed to evening. Water moves softly through channels. Leaves shift in the ventilation breeze. Somewhere, a pollination drone hums between flowers. The air smells of damp roots, green stems, and soil. Beyond the walls is interstellar night, colder than any winter Earth has known. But here, inside this chamber, lettuce unfolds, beans climb, algae glow, and a child kneels beside a tomato plant, watching the first yellow blossom open. That blossom is not small. It is a victory against vacuum. The closed loop of life teaches the deepest lesson of the generation ship. Survival is not an object stored in a vault. It is a relationship maintained every day. The ship lives only because countless exchanges continue. Breath to leaf, leaf to food, food to body, body to waste, waste to nutrient, nutrient to root, root to harvest, harvest to breath again. There is no final independence from nature. There is only the careful carrying of nature through darkness. And perhaps, after many decades, the people aboard would no longer think of the ship as artificial. They would understand that a forest under glass is still a forest. Recycled water is still water. A child born beneath artificial light is still a child of the cosmos. The boundary between natural and artificial would blur until the vessel becomes what Earth has always been, though larger and older and freer than we remembered. A life support system, a world of loops, a fragile blue-green promise, traveling inside a shell of metal through the endless black sea between suns. Chapter 4. The Society That Cannot Walk Away. A generation ship is not only a habitat, an engine, and a closed ecological system. It is a society with no outside. On Earth, even the most isolated community exists within a larger world. People can leave a town. Nations can trade. Exiles can cross borders. Refugees can seek another shore. Ideas arrive through books, signals, travelers, markets, wars, migrations, and accidents. No culture is truly sealed. But aboard a generation ship, society becomes a pressure vessel. Every argument remains inside. Every injustice echoes down the corridors. Every law affects people who cannot move to another country. Every political failure happens under the same roof as the water system, the farms, the nursery, and the engines. There is no wilderness where dissidents can disappear and begin again. There is no neighboring state to negotiate with. There is no distant court of appeal. The ship is the city, the nation, the biosphere, the economy, the prison, the temple, and the lifeboat. This changes everything. The first generation may launch with a constitution. They may write rights, duties, procedures, emergency powers, and limits on authority. They may design councils, elected offices, technical boards, courts, and educational systems. They may try to balance democracy with expertise, freedom with survival, and individual choice with mission continuity. They may believe they have prepared for every crisis, but time is the great editor of human plans. A document written on Earth may not feel sacred to a person born 200 years later beneath artificial light. Laws may drift. Words may change meaning. Emergencies may justify temporary powers that slowly become permanent. Technical experts may become a ruling class because only they understand the machinery. Or politicians may overpower engineers, making popular decisions that quietly endanger life support. Families may accumulate influence. Religious movements may rise around the mission. Anti-arrival factions may argue that the ship itself is the true homeland. Pro-arrival factions may accuse them of betraying the dead. A generation ship cannot avoid politics. It can only decide whether politics will be honest, visible, and peaceful, or hidden, bitter, and dangerous. The deepest political fact aboard the ship is dependency. Every person depends on strangers for air. The farmer depends on the engineer. The engineer depends on the teacher. The teacher depends on the doctor. The doctor depends on the waste processors. The waste processors depend on the children who will one day replace them. No one is truly independent. The myth of the self-made individual cannot survive long in a sealed ecosystem. A person may be brilliant, strong, and stubborn, but no one can breathe alone. This could create humility. It could also create control. A government that controls oxygen, water, food, reproduction policy, education, movement, information, and work assignments holds power more intimate than any Earth government has ever known. Even if the original system is democratic, the temptation toward authoritarian order may grow during crises. After a crop failure, after a fire, after a disease outbreak, after sabotage, people may ask for strong leadership. They may trade liberty for certainty, and perhaps, for a while, certainty may save them. But a ship that forgets liberty may survive as machinery while dying as a civilization. The challenge is not simple. Too much freedom can be dangerous in a closed world. One careless person can contaminate a farm. One extremist can damage a critical system. One untrained worker can misrepair a valve. One false rumor can trigger panic. Yet too much control can poison trust, creativity, and dignity. People who feel trapped may become exactly the threat the system fears. So the ship must cultivate something more difficult than obedience. It must cultivate belonging. Belonging cannot be ordered into existence. It must be built through fairness, ritual, education, transparency, shared labor, and a sense that every person has a meaningful place in the story. Children must grow up understanding the ship not merely as a set of restrictions, but as a living inheritance. They must know why water is rationed, why certain doors are sealed, why some skills are required, why old Earth languages are preserved, why the destination matters, and why the freedom of one person must never casually endanger the breath of all. Education becomes the spine of the society. On Earth, education prepares children for many possible futures. On a generation ship, education must do something more demanding. It must prepare children to maintain a world. Every generation must learn not only history and literature, but systems thinking, air chemistry, agriculture, repair logic, medical basics, conflict resolution, emergency behavior, navigation, ethics, ecology, mathematics, the old cultures of Earth, the ship's own history, the destination star, the reason the voyage began. But education must not become mere programming. A child is not a replacement part. A generation ship that treats children only as future workers will create resentment, emptiness, and perhaps rebellion. The young must be allowed to ask dangerous questions. Why are we going? Why should I care about a planet I may never see? Who gave the first crew the right to decide my life? What if the mission is wrong? What if we want to turn back? What if we cannot turn back? What does choice mean inside a sealed ark? A healthy ship must make room for those questions. Not because they are convenient, but because suppressing them would be more dangerous. Doubt spoken aloud can become philosophy. Doubt forbidden can become sabotage. Memory would be another form of life support. The ship must remember Earth, but carefully. Too much nostalgia could make shipboard life feel like a punishment. Too little memory could dissolve the mission into routine. Archives may contain oceans, forests, animals, cities, music, languages, and the recorded voices of the first generation. But how should Earth be taught? as paradise, as failure, as birthplace, as warning, as sacred home, as abandoned cradle. Different factions may tell different versions. Some may say Earth was a place of beauty that gave humanity everything. Others may say Earth was a world of conflict, waste, inequality, and danger, and that the ship represents a better beginning. Some may romanticize rain though they never felt it. Some may resent Earth as the ancient authority that sent them into confinement. Some may barely care, feeling more loyalty to the corridors, gardens, and rotating sky of the vessel than to any blue planet in an old recording. Culture aboard the ship would grow from this tension. There would be launch day ceremonies, harvest festivals, remembrance nights, engineering rites, birth rituals, coming-of-age trials, mourning practices, and songs written in the rhythm of ventilation fans and rotating habitats. The people may develop new accents, new slang, new myths, new art forms, and new spiritual ideas. They may name districts after Earth places no one has visited. They may paint murals of forests beside real hydroponic towers. They may speak of the outer hull as a horizon and the engine as a sleeping mountain. Over generations, the ship may become not only a vehicle, but an identity. This identity could protect the mission. It could also threaten it. If people love the ship deeply, arrival becomes complicated. Why land on an unknown planet after centuries of adaptation to a controlled world? Why risk alien microbes, gravity differences, climate instability, and open landscapes that may feel terrifying rather than liberating? To the descendants of the launch crew, a planet may not represent freedom. It may represent exposure. This is the paradox of the generation ship. To survive the journey, it must become home. But if it becomes home too completely, the destination may become an intrusion. Conflict is inevitable. There may be disputes over reproduction, work, privacy, religion, food allocation, genetic policy, leadership, historical truth, and whether to continue the mission. There may be crime. Theft aboard a ship is not like theft on Earth. Stealing food, tools, medicine, or access codes can endanger the entire community. Violence is also different. A fight in a corridor can damage equipment. A fire set in anger can become mass murder. Justice must protect society without becoming revenge. Prisons would be difficult. Space is limited. Labor is needed. Exile is impossible. Execution would raise severe ethical questions, especially in a small population. Rehabilitation may not be idealism. It may be necessity. A society that cannot walk away from its offenders must learn how to bring people back when it safely can, and beneath every law lies the emotional weight of enclosure. Everyone knows everyone, or knows someone who knows them. Family histories stretch through the same corridors. Old grudges can last for generations. A political argument may also be a family argument, a workplace argument, a marriage argument, and a food distribution argument. Privacy becomes precious. Solitude becomes medicine. Architecture must create spaces where people can be alone without being unsafe, and together without being trapped. Perhaps the most successful generation ship would not be the most efficient one. It would be the one that understands human beings are not engines. They need purpose, but also play. They need duty, but also tenderness. They need truth, but also stories. They need rules, but also forgiveness. In the deep night between stars, the ship society must become a moral ecosystem as carefully balanced as its air and water. Trust must be renewed like oxygen. Justice must be filtered like water. Culture must be cultivated like crops. Memory must be pruned, replanted, and protected from disease. From far away, no telescope may see this inner drama. The ship may appear as a faint artificial object moving across the dark, silent, and controlled. But inside, a civilization is arguing, singing, teaching, grieving, voting, marrying, aging, remembering, and becoming something no human society has ever been before. A people without a sky, a nation without land, a civilization that cannot walk away from itself. And perhaps that is the true test of the generation ship. Not whether human beings can build walls strong enough to hold air, but whether they can build a society gentle enough to hold one another. Chapter 5. Bloodlines in the Dark. A generation ship does not only carry people, it carries futures. Every child born aboard is a continuation of the mission, but also a biological question the ship must answer correctly. How many people are enough? How much genetic diversity is needed? How do you prevent disease, inbreeding, infertility, and inherited disorders from slowly accumulating inside a closed population? How do you protect personal freedom when reproduction is no longer only private, but tied to the survival of an entire civilization? On Earth, humanity is vast. Our species is spread across continents, climates, cultures, and billions of bodies. Genetic diversity flows through migration, marriage, ancestry, and chance. No single village contains the whole human future, but a generation ship begins with limits, a finite crew, a finite genetic library, a finite number of embryos, gametes, medical records, and reproductive possibilities. Once the ship departs, its biological world closes. This makes population size one of the most serious design choices. Too few people, and the ship risks inbreeding, social fragility, loss of skills, and vulnerability to disease or disaster. Too many people, and the life support system may be strained beyond safety. The ideal number is not a single, simple answer. It depends on journey length, reproductive planning, stored genetic material, medical technology, social structure, and how much risk the mission accepts. A ship carrying only a few dozen people might work in fiction, but for a real multi-century voyage, the population would likely need to be much larger, perhaps thousands or tens of thousands, unless extraordinary reproductive and genetic technologies are available. A small population is not just a family tree. It is a narrowing river. If close relatives have children over many generations, harmful recessive traits can become more common. Rare genetic disorders may appear more often. Fertility problems may spread. Immune system diversity may weaken. Even if the first generation is carefully selected for health, chance still matters. This is called genetic drift, the random change of gene frequencies over time. In a large population, chance is diluted. In a small population, chance can steer destiny. The ship would need a genetic plan. But that phrase is dangerous. A genetic plan can sound clean, rational, and scientific. It can also become cold, coercive, and cruel. History warns us that when governments try to control reproduction in the name of purity, efficiency, or destiny, the result can become deeply inhuman. A generation ship must avoid turning people into breeding units. It must protect dignity while also protecting the population from biological collapse. This may be one of the hardest balances aboard. The ship could carry a large genetic archive, frozen embryos, sperm, eggs, stem cells, and full genomic records from a diverse human population on Earth. Over time, stored genetic material could be introduced into the living population to reduce inbreeding and maintain diversity. Future medical systems might screen for serious inherited disorders, support fertility, and repair some genetic problems before birth. But every one of these tools raises moral questions. Who decides which embryos are used? Who has access to reproductive technology? Are parents free to choose? Can the ship require certain genetic matches? Can someone refuse? Can a child later challenge the decisions that shaped their birth? The closer survival comes to reproduction, the more intimate politics becomes. Imagine a young couple aboard the ship, standing in a quiet medical room beneath soft lights. They love each other. They want a child. But the ship's population council has identified a high risk of inherited disease if they conceive naturally. The doctors recommend using stored genetic material, or editing embryos, or choosing a different reproductive path. The couple hears the science. They understand the risk. But they also feel the ancient human desire to see themselves continued in a child. What is fair? No answer is painless. If the ship allows every choice without guidance, future generations may suffer. If the ship controls reproduction too strictly, the present generation may lose bodily freedom. Perhaps the only humane path is a system built on education, consent, transparency, counseling, and strong legal protections, with restrictions used only when the risk to the community is truly severe. But even then, the emotional cost would remain. Birth aboard a generation ship would be sacred and political at the same time. Each newborn changes the balance of resources, genetic diversity, family structure, education needs, future labor, and long-term population stability. The ship cannot allow unlimited growth. A population that rises beyond food, water, air, and housing capacity could doom everyone. So reproduction must be planned in some way. There may be birth quotas, generational targets, family licenses, waiting lists, or social agreements around timing and number of children. On Earth, such systems are controversial because people can imagine alternatives. On a generation ship, alternatives may not exist. Yet the fact that control is necessary does not make it harmless. A child born aboard the ship might grow up knowing that their existence was approved by a council, matched by an algorithm, or scheduled by demographic need. That knowledge could feel reassuring, like belonging to a carefully protected future. Or it could feel unbearable, like being treated as an outcome rather than a person. Medicine would carry similar weight. A generation ship must be a hospital that operates for centuries. It must manage pregnancy, birth, injury, infection, cancer, chronic illness, disability, mental health, aging, dentistry, surgery, rehabilitation, and emergency care. It must train new doctors continuously. It must manufacture or preserve medicines. It must maintain sterile equipment, imaging systems, surgical tools, laboratory capacity, and biological supplies. It must do all this without outside help. On Earth, medicine depends on enormous networks. Hospitals rely on global supply chains, factories, specialists, research centers, rare materials, blood banks, pharmaceuticals, replacement parts, and constant technological renewal. A generation ship would have to shrink that entire world into its medical decks. Some medicines expire, some equipment wears out, some skills are needed rarely, but when they are needed desperately. A surgeon may go years without performing a certain operation, then suddenly face a child whose life depends on that exact procedure. The ship must preserve expertise through simulation, training, archives, apprenticeships, and perhaps artificial intelligence systems. Though, even those systems require maintenance and trust. Disease in a closed ship would be terrifying. A contagious virus could spread quickly through shared air, shared surfaces, compact housing, and limited isolation space. The ship might have strict quarantine protocols, routine health monitoring, vaccination programs, microbial surveillance, and emergency lockdown zones. But a ship is not a planet. You cannot simply move infected people to another city. You cannot abandon an entire district if it contains essential farms or water systems. The community must become skilled at containment without panic. There is another subtle danger: immune systems shaped by enclosure. If the ship is too sterile, future generations may develop immune problems. If it carries too many uncontrolled microbes, disease risk rises. The human body evolved in conversation with microbial life. A healthy ship may need a healthy microbiome, not a war against all bacteria. The goal is not absolute sterility. The goal is balance. Then there is evolution. Over a long enough time, a closed human population may begin to change. Not into something unrecognizable overnight, but gradually. If gravity is lower than Earth, bodies may adapt culturally and perhaps biologically across generations. If radiation exposure differs, if diets are different, if reproductive choices are managed, if diseases are rare or common in new ways, the population's traits may shift. A ship may begin with humans from Earth, but after centuries, its descendants could become subtly adapted to ship life. This may create a painful question at arrival. Will people born in artificial gravity be able to live comfortably on a planet? What if the destination world has gravity stronger or weaker than the ship's? What if its light spectrum, day length, atmosphere, allergens, minerals, or microbial environment challenge bodies adapted to the arc? The generation ship must not only keep humans alive during the voyage, it must preserve their ability to become planetary again, or accept that they are becoming something else. Disability also requires deeper thought. In a survival-focused society, there may be pressure to value people mainly by their usefulness. This is dangerous. A civilization that measures human worth only by labor has already lost something essential. People with disabilities, chronic illnesses, or different abilities must not be treated as burdens to be minimized. At the same time, the ship's resources are limited. Medical ethics will be tested again and again, not in abstract debates, but in real choices about care, allocation, adaptation, and dignity. A humane generation ship would design for variation. It would build accessible spaces, flexible work roles, strong caregiving systems, and cultural respect for people beyond productivity. The old, the sick, and the disabled are not outside the mission. They are part of the moral reason the mission exists. Death, too, would be transformed. On Earth, burial returns the body to land. Cremation releases it to air and ash. In some cultures, bodies are given to rivers, fires, forests, or ancestors. On a generation ship, the body cannot simply be lost. Its matter belongs to the closed loop. The calcium, phosphorus, nitrogen, carbon, and water in a human body are precious. They may need to return to the ship's ecological cycles. This could feel horrifying from one perspective, sacred from another. A funeral aboard the ship might involve ceremony before biological recycling. The community may gather in a dim hall where images of Earth and the destination star glow side by side. Names are spoken, memories are offered. Then, gently and with ritual, the body is returned to the systems that feed the gardens. Months later, a child may eat fruit grown from nutrients once held in an ancestor's bones. There is grief in that. There is also continuity. The closed biological world makes literal what has always been true on Earth. Life feeds life. We are made from those before us, and we become part of those who follow. Bloodlines in the dark are not only about genes, they are about care. A child inherits DNA, but also lullabies, warnings, recipes, fears, tools, myths, and unfinished arguments. A ship's population is not merely a breeding population. It is a living archive of bodies and stories. The greatest biological danger may not be mutation or disease. It may be forgetting that biology is personal. Every demographic chart is made of lovers, parents, infants, elders, miscarriages, hopes, refusals, and names. Every genetic strategy touches someone's body. Every population policy enters someone's home. If the ship survives by crushing the private heart of human life, then survival becomes a smaller word than it should be. A generation ship must protect the species without betraying the person. That is a narrow passage. Outside, the stars burn with ancient indifference. Inside, a doctor listens for a fetal heartbeat. A geneticist reviews old Earth genomes. A grandmother teaches a child the names of animals extinct in memory, but preserved in archives. A young adult argues before a council for the right to choose love over optimization. In the farms, plants rise from recycled minerals. In the nursery, another generation takes its first breath. The ship moves forward, not because its engines are powerful, but because life insists on continuing. And in the darkness between suns, the human future may depend on something as fragile as a cell dividing correctly, a mother surviving childbirth, a community choosing mercy, and a child growing up without feeling that destiny has stolen their soul. Chapter 6. Minds Beneath an Artificial Sky. The hardest part of deep space may not be the cold. It may be the quiet, not silence in the simple sense. A generation ship would never be truly silent. It would breathe through vents. It would hum through pumps. It would murmur through wires, fans, motors, footsteps, voices, water channels, and distant machinery. Even in sleep, the ship would have a pulse. But beyond those sounds, there would be a deeper quiet. No wind moving across continents. No ocean dragging stones along a shore. No thunder rolling over mountains. No insects singing after rain. No wild birds at dawn. No open horizon where the eye can travel farther than a wall. No weather arriving from far away. No seasons except the ones created by schedule, lighting, and agricultural need. No moon rising unexpectedly above a dark field. No real sky. For a human mind, this matters. We are not only thinking machines, we are landscape-shaped creatures. Our nervous systems were formed in forests, grasslands, deserts, coastlines, caves, rivers, and villages under changing light. The human brain expects variation. It expects distance. It expects natural irregularity. Even when we live in cities, the ancient mind still responds to clouds, trees, sunlight, storms, birds, and the curve of land. We may forget this need, but the body remembers. A generation ship must therefore care for mental life as carefully as it cares for oxygen. It is tempting to imagine psychological health as a secondary problem, something to consider after the engines, radiation shields, farms, and water systems have been solved. But in a closed society, the mind is also infrastructure. Depression can reduce maintenance. Panic can break trust. Chronic stress can damage health. Isolation can fracture families. Meaninglessness can become political rebellion. A single despairing person with access to the wrong system may threaten everyone, so the ship must be designed not only to function, but to be endured. More than endured, it must be lived in. The first psychological challenge is confinement. Even a huge vessel would still be finite. People would know every major corridor, every park, every window, every district, every public space. Childhood exploration would eventually run into sealed doors and pressure walls. Adolescents, whose minds are built to test boundaries, would find that the ultimate boundary cannot be crossed. The hull is not merely architecture, it is the edge of the world. Some people might adapt beautifully. Others might feel a lifelong pressure in the chest, a sense that existence has been folded too tightly around them. Claustrophobia may become not only a fear of small rooms, but a philosophical condition. The knowledge that there is no outside may trouble even those who never consciously think about it. Artificial open spaces would help. The ship might contain large rotating habitats with broad walkways, tall interior volumes, layered gardens, water features, and carefully designed sightlines. The architecture may use curves, mirrors, projected skies, and living plants to create a sense of depth. There may be chambers where people can look across hundreds of meters of cultivated landscape, enough for the brain to feel distance. There may be observation halls where the stars are visible through shielded glass or external imaging systems, giving people a direct relationship with the universe beyond the hull. But even stars can become oppressive. On Earth, the night sky is softened by air, horizon, moonlight, and the knowledge of ground beneath our feet. In interstellar space, the stars would not twinkle. They would burn hard and still. No atmosphere would make them shimmer. No landscape would frame them. For some, that view would be sacred. For others, it might feel like looking into eternity without protection. The ship's designers may create different kinds of visual experience. Earth rooms with projected forests, beaches, deserts, and cities. Star rooms for contemplation. Dark rooms for sleep and sensory rest. Seasonal gardens with changing colors. Public squares bright with artificial morning. Quiet corridors dimmed to blue. The goal would not be deception, but emotional variety. A second challenge is monotony. Human beings need rhythm, but we also need surprise. A generation ship runs best on routine. Farms must follow cycles. Maintenance must be scheduled. Sleep and lighting must be regulated. Education must be planned. Resource use must be predicted. Too much randomness can be dangerous, yet too little randomness can deaden the soul. Aboard the ship, culture may become the source of weather. Festivals, performances, debates, games, art installations, competitions, seasonal meals, theatrical retellings of Earth history, simulated storms, and rotating community roles may provide change. The society may deliberately create novelty in safe forms, understanding that boredom is not harmless. Boredom can become resentment. Resentment can become mythology. Mythology can become revolt. There may be a day of rain when children gather in a sealed garden and water falls from the ceiling in warm droplets while recordings of thunder roll through the walls. There may be a night of oceans when the habitat lights dim and old Earth seas are projected across the great central dome. There may be a festival of arrival, celebrated long before arrival is possible, not as a prediction, but as an act of renewal. There may be days when the ship's oldest recordings are played, and the voices of the launch generation speak again to descendants they never imagined. These rituals would be more than entertainment. They would be psychological maintenance. The third challenge is generational meaning. The first crew understands the mission because they chose it, or at least witnessed its beginning. They remember the reasons: survival, exploration, scientific ambition, escape, hope, fear, or some combination of all these. They may carry the emotional fire of departure. They saw Earth shrink behind them. They felt the engines begin. Their grandchildren inherit the consequences, but not the moment. For later generations, the mission may feel like an ancient command. The destination may be a lesson in school, a symbol on flags, a coordinate in navigation systems, a star in the forward cameras that barely changes. It is difficult to devote one's life to a promise that will be fulfilled by someone else. It is even harder when the promise was made by the dead. This creates a psychological burden unique in human history. Many civilizations have built for the future. Cathedrals, irrigation systems, libraries, constitutions, and scientific projects can outlast their founders. But the builders usually still live under an open sky, inside a world with many possible meanings. On a generation ship, the future project surrounds every person completely. There is no private life entirely separate from the mission. Even falling in love, choosing a career, having a child, or refusing a duty can become part of the question. Are you serving the voyage? The ship must allow people to have lives that are not swallowed by destiny. A maintenance worker should be allowed to love music more than engines. A farmer should be allowed to dream about painting. A child should not feel guilty for being bored by navigation history. The mission must be large enough to contain ordinary happiness. Otherwise, it becomes a burden too heavy to inherit. Mental health care would need to be woven into daily life. Counselors, peer support networks, conflict mediators, family therapists, spiritual leaders, artists, teachers, and physicians would all help maintain psychological stability. The ship may use private monitoring for sleep disruption, stress patterns, social withdrawal, and early signs of crisis, but surveillance can easily become oppressive. A society that watches everyone for their own good may create the anxiety it hopes to prevent. Trust is essential. People must know they can ask for help without being marked as dangerous or defective. In a closed community, reputation can follow a person for life. Privacy protections would not be luxuries. They would be necessary for honesty. Grief would also be different aboard the ship. On Earth, grief is often held by place. A childhood home, a graveyard, a river, a road, a certain tree, a certain room where someone once laughed. On the ship, place is limited and shared. The dead remain close in memory because no one can go far away. Families may live for generations in the same district where their ancestors worked, argued, and died. This could create deep continuity, but also emotional crowding. The ship may need memorial spaces where grief can move, halls of names, gardens where nutrients from the dead help flowers grow, audio archives where people leave messages for descendants, quiet rooms looking outward into the stars, rituals of release, even when there is nowhere to release the body except back into the closed loop. Love, too, would be shaped by enclosure. On a planet, there are always more strangers somewhere. On a generation ship, the pool of possible partners may be limited by population size, genetic policy, social networks, and history. Everyone's relationships may feel visible. Breakups could echo through workplaces and family systems. Forbidden love may become politically charged if reproduction rules are involved. Loneliness may be intense, not because there are no people, but because there are no new worlds of people. The ship must protect intimacy from becoming administration. There must be room for romance, secrecy, embarrassment, longing, foolishness, heartbreak, and the unpredictable chemistry of being human. A society that tries to make love efficient may discover that love resists engineering. Then there is the question of children. Children born aboard the ship would be psychologically adapted in ways the launch generation cannot fully predict. To them, curved floors, artificial daylight, recycling rituals, population planning, and the absence of open sky may feel normal. They may not experience the ship as deprivation until they are taught what Earth had. In some ways, the adults may create longing by preserving memory. A child who never sees an ocean cannot miss it unless someone gives the ocean shape in imagination. Should they be told everything? The answer must be yes, but gently. To hide Earth would be a betrayal. To worship Earth as a lost paradise may be another kind of cruelty. Children need truth that does not make their own lives feel counterfeit. They need to know that the sky was real, rain was real, forests were real, and animals moved across continents. But they also need to know that their shipboard lives are real too. Their friendships, gardens, games, fears, and dreams are not lesser because they occur beneath a manufactured dawn. Perhaps the mature culture of a generation ship would stop asking whether artificial means false. Artificial gravity can still hold a child safely to the floor. Artificial light can still grow a leaf. A simulated storm can still comfort someone who has never known weather. A metal-walled home can still be filled with tenderness. The human heart does not only respond to origins, it responds to meaning. Still, there may be those who cannot adapt. Some people may experience deep space as imprisonment. Some may become obsessed with Earth. Some may deny the destination. Some may believe the ship has lost its purpose. Some may seek transcendence in religion, virtual worlds, extreme politics, or dangerous experiments. Some may simply become tired in a way no medicine can easily cure. The ship must expect this, not as failure, but as part of the human range. A mental health system that assumes everyone should be cheerful is dishonest. A generation ship will contain melancholy. It will contain anger. It will contain existential dread. The goal is not to eliminate darkness from the mind, but to help people carry it without letting it consume the vessel. In the quiet hours, when the artificial night settles over the habitat, a person may lie awake and feel the full weight of the journey. The engines are silent. The stars outside are unreachable. The destination will not arrive in their lifetime. Their parents were born here. Their children may die here. The walls are warm, the air is clean, the systems are stable, and still the question rises, what is my life for? This question is not unique to space. It has followed human beings since the beginning. But aboard the generation ship, it becomes sharper, because the answer cannot be borrowed from geography. There is no mountain village, no homeland soil, no ancient river, no changing weather to make meaning feel natural. Meaning must be made deliberately. Perhaps that is what the ship teaches, that human beings have always lived beneath artificial skies of one kind or another. Nations, myths, calendars, borders, currencies, rituals, and histories are all structures we build to hold the mind against chaos. Earth gave us a physical sky, but we filled it with stories. The generation ship merely makes the construction visible. And so, beneath its artificial sky, the people continue. They wake to scheduled dawn. They tend gardens under lamps. They argue in council rooms. They fall in love beside water tanks. They mourn in memorial halls. They teach children the names of clouds. They gather for the day of rain. They look through observation glass at stars that do not move. And slowly, across generations, the ship becomes not only a vessel through space, but a vessel for the mind. A place where humanity learns that survival requires more than breath. It requires wonder. It requires memory. It requires the courage to find beauty in a world built by hands, while traveling through a universe that offers no promise except distance. Chapter 7. the ethics of the unborn voyage. The most difficult question about a generation ship may not be whether we can build one. It may be whether we have the right. At first, the mission sounds noble. Humanity reaches beyond the solar system. A great arc carries life across the void. The species refuses to remain forever on one fragile planet. The ship becomes a monument to courage, engineering, imagination, and hope. From a distance, it feels almost sacred. But look closer. The first generation may choose to leave Earth. They may understand the risk. They may sign the documents, enter the habitat, say farewell to the old sky, and accept that they will die in transit. Their consent, however complicated, is at least possible. Their children cannot consent. Their grandchildren cannot consent. The majority of people who live aboard the generation ship may be born into a mission they did not choose, inside a world they cannot leave, moving toward a destination selected by ancestors they never met. They inherit not only a culture, not only a language, not only a history, but a physical trajectory through space. Their lives are shaped by a decision made before their existence. This is the central ethical shadow of the generation ship. All human beings are born into conditions they did not choose. No child chooses their planet, nation, family, body, language, class, history, or century. In that sense, the generation ship is not unique. Every birth is an arrival into an unfinished story. But aboard the ship, the lack of choice becomes more extreme because the environment is sealed, the mission is total, and alternatives are limited. A child born in a city on Earth may someday leave the city. A child born aboard the ship cannot walk into another world. The ship is inheritance without exit. Some may argue that this is still acceptable if the lives aboard are good lives. If children are loved, educated, healthy, free within reasonable limits, and protected by a just society, then perhaps birth aboard a generation ship is not morally different from birth anywhere else. After all, no parent can ask permission from the child who does not yet exist. Every generation makes decisions that shape the next. We build cities, damage climates, preserve languages, start wars, plant forests, write laws, and leave debts. The unborn always inherit the consequences of the living, but a generation ship makes that inheritance visible and mechanical. The question becomes, what obligations do the founders have to those who will never know Earth? They must provide more than survival. To bring children into a sealed vessel and offer only air, food, and duty would not be enough. The founders must design for dignity, freedom, beauty, education, health, privacy, justice, and the possibility of disagreement. They must not treat future people as cargo. They must not use them merely as a bridge to a destination. A child aboard the ship is not an instrument for completing the dreams of the dead. A child is an end in themselves. This means the mission must be ethically reversible in spirit, even if it is physically hard to reverse in space. Future generations must have some meaningful power over the journey. They should be able to revise laws, reinterpret goals, change leadership, adjust population plans, alter cultural practices, and perhaps even debate the destination itself. If the ship discovers new information, if the target planet proves unsuitable, if the society aboard decides that settlement would be destructive or impossible, the living should not be enslaved to the original plan. A mission that cannot be questioned becomes a religion without mercy. And yet, too much flexibility may endanger everyone. If each generation can casually abandon long-term maintenance, navigation, education, or ecological discipline, the ship may fail. The founders must preserve enough continuity to keep the vessel alive, while allowing enough freedom to keep the people alive in the moral sense. This is an ethical engineering problem. Not all constraints are oppression. A pressure wall is a constraint. A water quota is a constraint. A quarantine protocol is a constraint. A rule against damaging the air system is a constraint. Without these, freedom collapses into vacuum. But constraints must be justified, limited, and accountable. The ship must teach the difference between necessary boundaries and inherited domination. There is also the question of selection. Who gets to board? A generation ship could never carry all of humanity. It would begin with a chosen group: scientists, engineers, doctors, farmers, teachers, artists, children, families, genetic donors, and specialists. But who chooses them? Governments, corporations, international councils, wealthy patrons, religious movements, military authorities, lottery systems. If the ship is meant to preserve humanity, whose humanity does it preserve? Selection can become a mirror of injustice. If the passengers are chosen only from the powerful, the wealthy, or the politically favored, then the ship carries inequality into the stars. If selection favors only certain cultures, languages, bodies, or beliefs, then the Ark becomes an instrument of erasure. If the mission claims to represent Earth, it must face the impossible task of carrying a fair fragment of Earth, not only in genes, but in memory, art, knowledge, and moral perspective. Diversity is not decoration aboard a generation ship. It is resilience. A monoculture is fragile in agriculture, and it is fragile in society. A ship needs many skills, many temperaments, many ways of solving problems, many stories about what it means to be human. It must carry scientific knowledge, yes, but also songs, myths, recipes, ceremonies, philosophies, jokes, histories, and griefs from many peoples. A civilization reduced to one narrow image of humanity may survive biologically while arriving spiritually impoverished. Then comes the destination. Suppose the ship reaches a planet where life already exists. Even simple microbial life would transform the mission ethically. A living world is not empty just because it has no cities. Microbes are not scenery. They are the beginning of a biosphere, a second genesis, perhaps an independent answer to the question of life in the universe. To land human beings there, with our organisms, our waste, our crops, our bacteria, and our hunger for territory, could contaminate or destroy something priceless. The generation ship might arrive as a miracle of survival and become an ecological disaster. So the ethics of arrival must be planned before departure. The ship must be prepared to study before settling, to orbit before landing, to protect alien ecosystems, to accept disappointment, and perhaps to decide that a living world must remain untouched. That would be a profound tragedy for those who spent centuries traveling. Imagine arriving at the promised star and being told that the planet below is not yours to use. Could the descendants accept that? Would they have been educated to value life beyond human need? Or would the pressure of centuries make restraint impossible? If the target world is lifeless, other questions arise. Does humanity have the right to terraform it, to reshape its air, water, chemistry, and climate for our own survival? If no life exists there, perhaps the moral barrier is lower. But even lifeless worlds have scientific value. They tell the story of planetary formation, chemistry, and cosmic history. To transform them is to erase evidence. Exploration always changes what it touches. Settlement changes it more. The generation ship is therefore not only an ark. It is a test of whether humanity can become powerful without becoming careless. This test begins long before launch. Why are we leaving? That question matters. If the ship is built because Earth is dying from our own actions, then the vessel carries both hope and accusation. If we cannot care for the planet that made us, why believe we can care for a smaller, more fragile world of metal? A generation ship should not become an excuse to abandon responsibility on Earth. The dream of the stars must not become a permission slip for destroying the cradle. Interstellar travel may expand humanity, but it cannot absolve humanity. Perhaps the most ethical generation ship would be built not by a civilization fleeing its failures, but by one that has learned from them. A civilization that has restored ecosystems, reduced violence, protected knowledge, respected diversity, and understood that survival is not conquest. Only then would the Ark carry wisdom, not merely technology. Still, we should be careful with perfection. If we wait for humanity to become flawless, no ship will ever launch. Every civilization that builds a generation ship will be morally unfinished. It will carry contradictions, wounds, prejudices, and unresolved arguments. The goal is not purity. The goal is humility. A humble generation ship would teach its children that the mission is not destiny carved in stone. It is a gift and a burden, open to judgment by the living. It would honor the founders without worshiping them. It would preserve Earth without lying about it. It would prepare for arrival without assuming ownership. It would recognize that future generations are not the property of the past. In the quiet courtrooms of the ship, these questions may be debated by people who have never felt natural wind. In classrooms, children may ask whether their ancestors were brave or arrogant. In council chambers, leaders may weigh the rights of the unborn against the needs of the present. In memorial gardens, names of the first crew may be spoken with gratitude, resentment, and love all at once. That mixture may be the most honest inheritance, because every great human project contains both light and shadow. The generation ship is beautiful because it imagines humanity refusing extinction, refusing smallness, refusing to let the stars remain forever unreachable. It is troubling because it asks some lives to serve a horizon they may never see. And perhaps the only way to make such a voyage moral is to remember always that the people aboard are not sacrifices to the mission. They are the mission, not the planet ahead, not the star on the navigation charts, not the dream of the founders. The living community inside the ship, breathing, loving, doubting, learning, and choosing again, is the true measure of success. If one day humanity sends an ark into the dark, its greatness will not be proven by distance crossed, engines fired, or flags planted under another sun. It will be proven by whether a child born halfway between stars can grow up and say, with honesty rather than indoctrination, that life aboard the ship was not a sentence, but a world worthy of being lived. And only then, perhaps, will the long voyage deserve the name Hope. Chapter 8. The Star That Waits. For most of the voyage, the destination would be an idea, a coordinate, a bright point in old telescopic images, a name spoken in classrooms, a symbol painted on walls, a star used in songs, ceremonies, navigation lessons, and arguments about the future. Generations would live and die while that star remained almost unchanged, a tiny promise ahead of the ship, too distant to feel real. Then, 1 century, or 2 centuries, or 5 centuries after departure, something would change. The star would begin to grow. Not quickly. Nothing in interstellar travel is quick. But instruments would detect what human eyes could not yet feel. The target sun would brighten in the forward cameras. Its planets would separate from the glare as faint moving points. Spectrometers would read atmospheres. Telescopes would map orbits, temperatures, clouds, ice caps, dust rings, moons, and perhaps the chemical signatures of life. For the first time in the history of the ship, arrival would stop being mythology and become weather reports, orbital charts, landing simulations, and medical preparations. The descendants of Earth would gather in observation halls and look forward. Imagine that moment. A population born inside metal and gardens, raised under artificial dawns, standing together beneath the quiet hum of a world their ancestors built. Teachers, engineers, farmers, doctors, children, elders, skeptics, believers, artists, historians, and those who never wanted arrival at all. They look at a screen or through a shielded window and see the destination star not as a lesson, but as a sun. The ship has crossed the wall of distance, but now it faces something just as dangerous: change. A generation ship is designed around continuity. It survives because routines are preserved, systems are maintained, population is managed, and culture renews the mission. Arrival breaks that pattern. The vessel that has been home for centuries must become, once again, a vehicle. Its purpose shifts from enduring the journey to deciding what happens next. This may be the most unstable period in the entire mission. If the target system contains a habitable planet, the ship must not rush. Long-range dreams are not the same as local truth. A world may look promising from light years away and still be deadly up close. Its air may contain toxic gases. Its soil may lack necessary chemistry. Its gravity may strain shipborne bodies. Its microbes, if they exist, may ignore human biology completely or interact with it in unpredictable ways. Its climate may swing between extremes. Its oceans may be acidic. Its radiation environment may be harsher than expected. Its seasons may last years. A planet is not automatically a home. The first arrivals may not land at all. They may enter orbit and study. Robotic probes may descend first, sinking through alien clouds, tasting air, drilling ice, measuring radiation, searching for biology, and sending back images of landscapes no human being has ever seen. Perhaps there are copper deserts under a pale sun. Perhaps black mountains rise above frozen plains. Perhaps oceans flash silver beneath violet skies. Perhaps there are no oceans at all, only dust, storms, and silence. The people aboard would watch these images with emotions no earlier generation could know. Joy, fear, relief, suspicion, grief. Because the destination, once seen clearly, cannot remain perfect. Every dream becomes smaller when it becomes real. For centuries, the target world may have carried every hope the ship could not satisfy. Open sky, land, freedom, a future larger than corridors. But the real planet will have limits. It will not match every story. It may be beautiful, but beauty does not make it safe. It may be safe, but not beautiful in the way people expected. It may be usable, but only after decades of preparation. Some will want to descend immediately. Some will want to wait. Some will refuse to leave the ship. And they may have reason. To the shipborne, a planet may feel enormous and frightening. Natural gravity may pull too strongly. The open horizon may cause dizziness or panic. Weather may seem violent. Rain, so romantic in old songs, may feel like the sky falling apart. Wind may feel like invisible hands. Soil may smell too alive. The sun may be too bright, too raw, too uncontrolled. On the ship, every environment had intention. On a planet, nature does not ask permission. The first landing party would carry not only equipment, but the weight of all the dead. They would step down a ladder, or descend from a lander, or walk out of a pressurized rover and place human feet on a world that launch ancestors never saw. Their boots might press into red dust, gray ice, black sand, or living moss. Above them, another sun would shine. Not the sun of Earth, but a stranger star, older or younger, brighter or dimmer, warmer or colder, yet now part of the human story. What would they say? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps the first words on another habitable world should be silence, a silence wide enough to hold the centuries. Then the work would begin. Habitats must be built, airlocks sealed, crops tested, water purified. Medical teams must study how bodies respond. Ecologists must protect against contamination in both directions. Engineers must decide what parts of the ship can be reused. Political councils must determine who descends first, who remains in orbit, who governs the settlement, and whether the ship continues as a station, a museum, a city, or a sacred relic. The generation ship may not end at arrival. It may become the first capital, orbiting above the new world like an artificial moon. It may remain a refuge in case the planet fails. It may house those who cannot adapt to the surface. It may send down materials, knowledge, seeds, embryos, and machines. It may watch over the settlement for generations more, still breathing, still recycling, still holding the memory of Earth. But eventually, a choice must be made. Does humanity become planetary again? Or has the ship created a new kind of human being? One whose true homeland is not a planet, but movement. Some may argue that the voyage proves we do not need worlds. The ship survived. Its society grew. Its children loved, learned, and built meaning beneath artificial skies. Perhaps humanity should continue outward, building more arcs, more habitats, more moving civilizations. Perhaps planets are cradles, but not destinies. Others will kneel on alien ground, touch soil with trembling hands, and know that no machine can replace this feeling. The openness, the horizon, the wildness, the terrible generosity of a world that is not fully controlled. They will say that the journey was always for this, to return human life to land, sky, and weather beneath another sun. Both may be right. The generation ship changes the meaning of home. It teaches that home is not only where we began, it is where life is protected, where stories are shared, where children are held, where the dead are remembered, where the future is allowed to enter. Earth was home. The ship was home. The new planet may become home. Human beings may be creatures of many homes, carrying the first one inside every breath. And what of Earth? By the time the ship arrives, Earth may be changed beyond recognition. It may be thriving. It may be wounded. It may remember the Ark as legend. Messages between the stars would take years, decades, or longer, depending on distance. The descendants of the ship may send a signal back across the dark. We have arrived. We are alive. The world ahead is real. No one aboard can know who will receive it. Perhaps Earth will answer. Perhaps it will not. But the message itself matters. A thread cast backward through space and time. A voice from children of children of children, telling the cradle that the long promise was kept. In the final scene, imagine the ship in orbit around the new world. Below, clouds move over continents no human ancestor named. Rivers shine in the light of an alien dawn. The old vessel turns slowly, scarred by centuries of radiation, repaired 1,000 times, its garden still green, its archives still whispering with the oceans of Earth. Inside, An old woman sits near an observation window with a child beside her. The child was born near the end of the voyage, young enough that the planet below may become memory, not myth. The old woman points downward and tells the child that people once lived on another world, under another sun, and built this ship because the stars were far and hope was stubborn. The child asks if the ship is over now. The old woman looks at the planet, then at the corridor behind them, where generations breathed, worked, suffered, sang, and dreamed. No, she says softly, nothing like this is ever over. It becomes part of what comes next, and perhaps that is the final truth of the generation ship. Its purpose is not only to reach another star. Its purpose is to prove that civilization can become patient enough to cross time, careful enough to carry a biosphere, wise enough to question its own mission, and tender enough to remain human in the dark. The stars do not come closer because we desire them. The universe does not soften because we are afraid. But somewhere in the long night, a ship may move forward anyway, filled with water, soil, machines, songs, laws, doubts, seeds, children, and the fragile warmth of human breath. A small world sailing through the ancient dark. A civilization inside a vessel. An arc between suns. And as we leave it there, orbiting the new dawn, we can imagine the lights dimming across its quiet habitats. The farms enter artificial night. The engines rest. The people sleep beneath a sky they built, beside a planet they may finally learn to love. Outside, the star waits. Inside, humanity dreams. Good night. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this journey on deep space unknown. In the silence between the stars, your presence means more than you know. If this story gave you a moment of wonder, peace, or curiosity, please support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. Your support helps us continue exploring the deepest mysteries of space, time, and the human future. Leave a comment below and tell us what cosmic question you want to travel into next. Until the next voyage, keep looking up.